Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM. This is a show where we hang out and we talk about games, mainly role-playing games, things that are beautiful, things that inspire us to become better game masters, better players, better humans. And I've got a, a pair of great books to talk with you about this morning. From Troll Lord Games and Castles and Crusades, I've got the Adventurer's Armory, which is a massive tome clocking in at 320 pages. But before I get started that, if you didn't check it out, on Sunday we released our interview with Matt and Nick over at Black Lodge Games. Those guys are great to talk with. I'm hoping we're going to get a little bit more conversations in with them over the next couple of months. If you haven't checked out Shuck Oyster or Cults of Zahak, what are you doing? Go get those books. So, we covered the Castles and Crusades starter set, and to the person who said, hey, could you put all of your Castles and Crusades stuff in one playlist, I have good news for you. Hopefully tomorrow we will be recording the first episode of the the Lord of Trolls Wills It, our new Castles and Crusades show. So, probably not for BTS, but definitely in that show. You know I love Castles and Crusades. We went over the starter box last week. Again, one more piece of news before I jump into this. We won't have a show on Thursday. I know it's been a little spotty. My health has been wonkadoo to say the least, and I have a follow-up doctor's appointment with the state on Thursday, so wish me luck. Okay, love Castles and Crusades. Love the things that they're doing to expand their game line. Adventurer's Armory is a book of equipment, and if you're a player, who doesn't love more gear? I mean, that's the entirety of the appeal of Shadowrun, right? Is essentially shopping for more guns. I know that's what Mark likes about Shadowrun. Also, good morning to Mark and James and to Padre and to Tink and to John Doom. All right, so it says, you still owe me an answer to the question I posed about another medieval game. What is the other medieval game that you were asking me about, James? So, the Adventurer's Armory covers a ton of new gear, and they have it broken down by broad category. So you have, knives, daggers, maces, flails, swords, pole arms, and a ton of other bows, crossbows. You've got a ton of new gear. And then at the end of the book, they go over a review, which was interesting to me. They went over a review of the combat rules, just to say, hey, most of this gear is focused on combat, because it is. It's armor and weapons and shields. And so it goes over a review of the basic combat rules in Castles and Crusades. I'll go over to the hand cam to show off the great cover of Adventurer's Armory. So it goes over the combat rules, and then it introduces some new rules for combat, which I think some of which are beyond what I'm comfortable tracking in a game, and some of them I would definitely use. The new weapon traits are fantastic. You get each of the weapons has new traits which may grant extra attacks or bonuses to defense, or allow you to get around shields, which is why we invented flails. So there's a lot of great combat keywords that are going to be very easy for your players to track. There's also a very robust durability system that they added as an optional rule, which basically says your gear takes damage. Weapons take damage by inflicting damage. So they have a threshold, and every time they meet that threshold, unless you're taking care of your weapon, their durability, their effectiveness decreases a little bit. This represents the dulling and blunting of edges, cracks in halves, chips in blades, the bends and breaks in mace heads. But it requires your players to keep track of all of the damage they're doing with that weapon. And then, I know what you're talking about, James, and I will ping the person again because I've sent them 2 messages, and it's the hat trick that makes that worthwhile. And then, for armor, basically every time it has a durability stat, and your armor takes half the damage that you take. And every time you meet that threshold, the AC decreases, and you can split it between your shield and your armor. Some groups are going to love this level of verisimilitude. Some groups are going to look at it going, I don't want to track how much damage I'm taking on two different tracks and divide the other one. But I think for a durability system, it works out great. Some of us like that level of simulation, and it provides a gradient that is a little bit more refined than just, hey, your armor breaks or your weapon breaks when you know, roll a 1 or get hit with a 20. Oh man, I do love me some Dwarf Fortress, John Doom. That game is right up my alley. Less like, I mean, a little like SDC, Mark, but like think of it this way. Say your chain shirt provides a +2 to your AC and has a damage threshold of 20. Well, actually, JM, why don't we just, oh, here, let me, hey, this is the book I'm really excited to talk about as well. But let's take a practical example. All right, so Mark, let's say you were wearing um, Mycenaean plate armor, which gives you a +6 to your AC, and it has a durability of 50. So essentially, for every 100 points of damage, because the armor takes half of it, that +6 is going to be reduced by 1. So after your first 100 points of damage, you're dropping to a +5, and so on and so forth, going forward from that. Now, that, again, depends on if your group likes that level of granularity. And I'm saying some of the groups I know would love that. Some may not. So it really comes down to what level of simulation does your group enjoy. It's a simple way to do it, but it's another layer of bookkeeping. If your group is already balking at encumbrance value, adding this may not be the best way to go. If your group loves things like encumbrance value, then yeah, you should totally see if they would like to do something like this. Because again, a weapon breaking or armor needing to be repaired, as Mark was pointing out from Palladium Fantasy, is something that I enjoy in games. I like having the players have something to spend their money on. But also, this book is a great reference because, like, for example, in the armor section, what is cloth armor? What is leather? What is ringmail? What is boiled leather? It gives you historical references for how this stuff was actually made, which helps us as GMs better describe our world. So this book is $45 if you enjoy more gear. And actually, I think this book is great for either side of the table because I think your players are going to get the most use out of this book because now there's a ton of new gear and a ton of new keywords that they have to keep track of, but allows their variations between weapons to actually mean something. Oof, that is not a good way to make stakes, John. Just going to toss that out there, go equivocally on the side of medium. It's got to have some juice, maybe a tiny little bit of blood in it to really still be considered a steak. But this book is fantastic. First of all, the covers for both of these books are great. Troller Games, whatever you're doing with your cover artists or the guys who did the covers of the starter set, keep at it. I love it. This is a book for monsters. This is a book of monster weapons, listed by the most common monsters in fantasy games, plus a couple of the aired ones. And I adore this. So, for example, let's say your group is about to fight a hill giant. If you pull a hill giant stat out of a book, you're going to get, yeah, probably a big club and some rotten furs that it's wearing as armor, and, you know, it throws rocks, which is great. Maybe the first 2 or 3 times you fight them. And then after that, it's going to be like, oh, it's rocks and clubs and furs again. And especially with games like Castles and Crusades or any OSR game where that equipment list is really kind of, it helps flavor the monster stat block. This book shines for you. So for example, they give you a little overview of what the monster is. So we have a half page on hill giants and why they would use specialized gear. And then, all right, instead of the furs, what if they were in a bearskin cloak? Or wielded a bone club, which is just a giant femur from another monster? What if they had a church bell that they used as a helm? Or if they just chose to use a log as a weapon for their club? Things like using a wagon wheel as a shield, or using rock knuckles to enhance their hand-to-hand combat. So, this is essentially a book of gear to customize the monsters your PCs face. While it's statted out for the Siege engine, this would work with any OSR game, and I would argue that you could make it work for your 5th edition or Pathfinder games pretty easily. I wish more games would do something like this. Most often when we get new monster stats, they're either wild new monsters or very specific takes on an existing monster. This allows you to use all of the monsters you have and still take, 30 seconds to 2 minutes to figure out, well, what would make this monster a little bit cooler by giving them a little bit different gear. Additionally, if you're playing in old school games, you'll notice that most of the times monsters are listed, right, here's the base version, but if there are this many or more, you have a sub-chieftain or a captain, and if there's this many or more, you're going to fight a chief or a captain. And yes, typically that includes things like extra hit dice, or maybe a special ability, or a bonus to morale. This book allows you to kit them out differently. So all immediately from the time you start describing the group, sure, let's take a look here. You describe all of the orcs, but there's the one orc that's wielding a blade-catching shield and has a serrated sword that looks like it would just tear the flesh out of anyone who gets hit with it. Well, that orc suddenly is a lot more dangerous looking and sounding than the rest of them. So for example, I'm looking at the orcs right now. They have a heavy blade called the Tooth of Akgut, a D8 plus 2, so essentially kind of a heavier long sword, but it gives you a bonus to damage, but it's unwieldy, so it's a penalty to hit. That Flesh Eater dagger I was telling you about only does a D3 damage, but after a successful hit, you get to make another attack bypassing their armor, like ignoring their armor. It's a touch attack essentially. And if that attack hits, you deal damage ripping the blade free. Love stuff like this. Love the ability to customize my monsters without having to worry about a lot of excessive new rules, which is sometimes the way we as designers like to go. We want to say, well, this Gnoll is completely different than that other Gnoll, so here's 7 new abilities that you have to keep in mind. That can be exhausting for a dungeon master. So kudos to Troll Games. It is a great way to expand upon your Monsters and Treasures book. This book is cheaper than the Adventures Armory. Adventures Armory comes in at about $45 for a hardcover. This is $30 for a book about 160 pages. I've got links in the show notes to the PDF. If you want to get the physical book, you can always go over to Troll Games. And as I've mentioned before, one of the cool things about Troll Games is they want to support you if you're starting a club, and they want to support veterans in the industry. Their new factory is going to be open in some fashion to indie publishers to try and get more people kind of publishing in the US and more people getting access to cheap and easy printing. So kudos to Steve and all of those trolls over at Troll Games. Always glad to talk about your products on the show. One last little thing, if you've noticed, I've got a new hat. It's a cool hat. It is the Hyperborea hats that they just released. Let me see if I can get a good picture of that in there. With the, I think it's the Zathaqua emblem. Just got this in yesterday, and have to say, super comfortable. You guys know I love the people over at Northwind Adventures as well. Hyperborea is my go-to OSR game at this point. Love Axe 2, but there's something about the Clark Ashton Smith of it all in Hyperborea. The fact that you could just as easily find radiation grenades or xanthium lasers as you could a +1 sword. So, yeah. Thanks, John Doom. Love all of the steak recipes that we're seeing here. I tend to sear my steak on both sides, bring it up to just shy of the temp that I want, let it rest, make some compound butter, slather the top with compound butter, and once it's rested to the point that it pulls all of that moisture back in, it's ready to eat. The other thing I do is I'll let steak come up to room temperature, heavily salt both sides, and then let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes. You can always tell when it's ready because right when you put salt on, first it dries out, then it starts to bead up, and when it dries out again, that's when it's ready to go on the searer. I can say that I have had Tink's butter-basted steaks, and they are delicious. John Doom will have to get you in a Hyperborea game. It's an OSR game, but it has so much flavor and character in it. The classes are fantastic. I know I was talking about Trollord games, but this is my one show this week, so I'm gonna rant just a little bit. The cool thing about Hyperborea is you've got the 4 standard classes: fighter, thief, magic user, and priest, and then they each have 4 to 8 subclasses. And the advantage of playing a base class is you level up faster than any of the subclasses. So, sure, you could play a paladin and get all the cool abilities, but if you're playing a straight fighter, you're going to be leveling up faster. It leans into sort of the, I don't want a 1 die roll system. You use your d20 for everything that you would normally do in D&D, attacks and saves. But then most of the skills are a d12. So it's a 3 and 12, 4 and 12, 5 and 12 kind of a roll. Sometimes for exceptional things, you got to use a d100, and you got to, there's a method to the madness of choosing which die system is used for which thing. Plus, again, Clark Ashton Smith, H.P. Lovecraft, plus Conan, right? It's very much focused on the pulpiness of it all, which is, for me, pulp, sword, and sorcery is just kind of like a sweet spot for this kind of gaming. So that's it. That's all I have. That's the end of, sadly, this week's shows. We got Labor Day this weekend if you're here in the U.S., and I hope you all have a wonderful and relaxing Labor Day weekend. If you are traveling, stay safe. If you're staying at home, stay gaming. Until next time, I'm JM. This has been Behind the Screen. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming, and I will see you all next week. Until then, have a good one, everybody.